He walked away from one of the biggest car shows in the world and vanished into his own garage. Years later, someone opened the doors to Edd China's workshop, and inside was something no one expected. A half-finished invention, an idea ahead of its time, and a project that might have changed wheeler dealers forever. When Edd China left Wheeler Dealers in 2017, it didn't feel like a TV announcement. It felt like a funeral. Millions of viewers tuned in expecting more restorations, more wisdom, more calm explanations in front of half-finished dashboards. Instead, they got a shock. The show's tall, soft-spoken, and unmistakably brilliant co-host was gone. And the reason? A quiet but sharp creative divide that had been building behind the scenes for years. Edd had always been the soul of Wheeler Dealers, the mechanical anchor to Mike Brewer's fast-talking salesmanship. While Brewer haggled, Edd solved problems. While the show moved faster, Edd slowed it down to explain why a seized caliper wasn't just a fix. It was a lesson. But when the network brought in new producers, the tone shifted. Time-saving edits took priority over technical breakdowns. Too many spanners, they reportedly said. Edd pushed back. He believed the show had a responsibility, not just to entertain, but to teach, to demystify repairs, to give car lovers real, useful knowledge. But producers wanted speed, simplicity, more polish, less process. The friction became final when Edd refused to reduce the workshop segments to bite-sized cuts. Rather than compromise the integrity of his work, he walked. He made the announcement himself, alone, sitting in front of a GoPro, in what looked like a cluttered garage office. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't bitter. It was Edd, honest, quiet, dignified. And then, he disappeared. No new show, no public appearances, no grand tour. He vanished into his own space, out of the spotlight, out of the headlines, and straight into the one place no one could reach, his workshop. What no one realized at the time was that he didn't just leave a show. He was already building something else, something no one expected. After stepping away from Wheeler Dealers, Edd China didn't line up another network gig or launch a flashy new show. He simply vanished. A few interviews, some cryptic YouTube uploads, but nothing steady. No big announcements, no full-time return, just silence and speculation. Fans flooded forums asking where he'd gone. Rumors swirled. Some said he moved to the countryside. Others claimed he was consulting on EVs in secret. But those close to him knew the truth. Edd had gone back to the one place where the pressure disappeared. His workshop. It wasn't a studio. It wasn't for show. It was where Edd could breathe. A cavern of unfinished machines, scattered blueprints, antique tools, and experimental parts. For most people, it would look like chaos. But to Edd, it was freedom. He was finally off the leash. No deadlines, no creative interference, no cameras dissecting every word. Just a man, his mind, and his machines. There were no scripts to follow, no episodes to complete. If something took a week or a year, it didn't matter. The silence gave him room to think again, really think. And that's when it started. The project that would come to define everything he'd kept to himself during his final years on TV. He didn't name it at first, just called it The Conversion. A quiet experiment, just a chassis on jack stands. But it became an obsession, a restoration project that wasn't about resale value, but vision. A test of what could be possible when no one else was telling him what to do. And deep in that workshop, under dust and wires, a revolution was slowly taking shape. One that didn't need an audience, just time. Long before the mainstream caught up, Edd China was already looking past petrol. While others were restoring V8s and tuning turbos, Edd was asking different questions. What if classic cars could be green? What if you could keep the soul of a vintage machine, but give it a silent heart? It wasn't about following a trend, it was about future-proofing a passion. His obsession with sustainability wasn't just talk. During his wheeler-dealers years, Edd toyed with biofuels, converted vehicles for efficiency, and even designed electric furniture cars, just to challenge the way people thought about motion. But those ideas rarely made it to air. The show was about flipping classics, not rewriting them. And when he suggested EV conversions or hybrid builds, the response was always the same. Too risky, too complicated, not what our viewers want. So Edd waited, patiently, quietly. And once the spotlight dimmed, he didn't walk away from the idea. He doubled down. The workshop became his lab. Shelves filled with salvaged battery packs, electric motors, regenerative braking prototypes. His whiteboards turned into spider webs of diagrams, fusing old-school chassis layouts with next-gen powertrains. To him, this wasn't an experiment. It was inevitable. The auto world was changing, and Edd didn't want to be part of the past. He wanted to build a bridge between eras, to show that a car didn't need petrol to have a heartbeat, that torque could be silent and still thrilling. And so the project began. Not for fans, not for producers, but for the future Edd knew was coming, long before anyone else did. In the far corner of his workshop, under a canvas sheet and years of dust, sat a shell of a classic Mini. A British icon, small, efficient, beloved. But to Edd, it wasn't just a relic. It was a blank canvas. He didn't just want to restore it, he wanted to reimagine it. He stripped it down completely. Body off the frame, interior gutted, drivetrain removed. What went back in wasn't what anyone expected. No internal combustion, no gearbox. Instead, Edd designed a fully modular electric drive system, complete with swappable battery packs, regenerative braking, and a digital control hub hidden inside the dash. The idea? Build a usable, affordable EV platform that could be adapted to other classics without changing their DNA. He didn't give it a flashy name. He called it Project X in his notes, part out of mystery, part out of irony. Because he wasn't building this for approval. He was building it because no one else would. Each night, he returned to the build, tinkering with motor mounts, testing voltage curves, updating sketches. He even 3D printed certain brackets when off-the-shelf options didn't fit. His vision was bold but simple. A Mini that looked stock, but drove like the future. Friends who visited the shop said the car wasn't just different. It was alive, silent, sleek, and oddly spiritual. Like a ghost of the past possessed by something new. But as the project took shape, Edd faced the truth. No show would air it. No sponsor would back it. And that meant Project X would live, or die, in silence. Despite the innovation happening behind closed doors, Project X never made it to television. Not a single frame. Not even a whisper of it on wheeler-dealers. And for fans who only saw Edd China through the lens of the show, the electric Mini never existed. But behind the scenes, there was real interest. At first, Edd had pitched the idea quietly. A classic car converted to electric, done right. Not a gimmick, but a proof of concept that EV tech and restoration could live in harmony. He imagined an episode where viewers learned how to convert their own cars step by step. Not some hyper-modern Tesla clone, but a soulful EV with character and retro charm. The potential was massive, But the reaction from producers and sponsors was cold. Too niche. Too expensive. Our audience doesn't want electric. Edd was told it would confuse viewers, that it wasn't on brand. The network had already chosen its path. Fast flips, big reveals, petrol power. EVs didn't fit that formula. The marketing department didn't like it. The sponsors didn't see dollar signs. So the project was shelved, politely, but firmly. Edd was gutted. He'd always played the long game. He didn't mind being patient. But this was different. This was the future being rejected before it had a chance to prove itself. So rather than fight a losing battle, he quietly let the pitch go. He never mentioned it on air again, never brought it up in interviews. And behind the scenes, he stopped pushing. But he didn't stop building. Because even if the world wasn't ready to see Project X, he wasn't ready to let it go. Years passed. The show moved on. New hosts came in. Edd drifted further from the public eye. While fans followed him through workshop diaries and his eccentric builds, like the electric ice cream van or the world's fastest motorized couch, Project X remained hidden, half-covered, unfinished, untouched, until someone found it again. It happened when a former colleague was helping organize Edd's old workshop space. What was supposed to be a cleanup day turned into a time capsule discovery. In the back corner, underneath a dusty canvas, sat the Mini, frozen in time. The tires were low. The custom battery boxes had yellowed slightly. Exposed wiring snaked across the floor, but the shell was still intact. The vision, still unmistakable. At first glance, it looked like a forgotten build, but as the dust cleared, details began to emerge. Handwritten labels, custom mounts, brackets 3D printed with Edd's initials. Inside the cabin, the dashboard had been redesigned to house a touchscreen interface. Not a flashy aftermarket tablet, something built from scratch, integrated with the car's internals. On the workbench nearby were notes. Notebooks filled with sketches, torque specs, voltage readings, and component testing logs. It became clear that Project X hadn't been abandoned. It had been paused, left in limbo while the rest of the world caught up. But one page in particular stood out, and it changed everything about what this build truly meant. Among the neatly stacked notebooks was a single page, loose, faded at the edges, and marked in heavy black ink. At the top, in Edd's signature handwriting, were the words, "They'll never let me build this on air." Below it, a hand-drawn schematic of the Mini's undercarriage, battery placement, motor housing, and regenerative system layout. But this wasn't just technical scribbling. It was frustration poured onto paper. Arrows pointed to where the production team wanted to cut time. Notes mentioned segments removed and build detail stripped. It was clear. Edd hadn't just been blocked. He'd been silenced. Other diagrams showed possible variations, a modular kit design that could be replicated. He was planning not just one build, but a system. Something open source. Something that classic car enthusiasts around the world could download, fabricate, and install. Not a prototype, a movement. And yet, he walked away from it. Not because it didn't work, but because the platform he once trusted had no room for it. That note wasn't dramatic. It was honest. A quiet surrender from someone who had always chosen integrity over applause. To anyone else, it might have looked like failure. But to those who read between the lines, it was proof. Proof that Edd China wasn't just building a car, he was challenging an entire system. And that system simply wasn't ready. The discovery of Project X sparked an uncomfortable question, one that fans still debate today. What if Edd China had been allowed to finish it? Could it have changed the course of Wheeler Dealers? Could it have saved the show from the creative rift that ultimately drove him out? Imagine it, an episode where a classic Mini doesn't just get restored, but reimagined. Where viewers learn how to preserve their favorite cars without sacrificing their future. Edd walks them through the process. Battery selection, regenerative braking setup, interface calibration. It's still a build, still hands-on, still unmistakably Edd, but it's forward-facing. It bridges nostalgia with innovation. Producers feared the audience wouldn't accept it, but the world changed faster than they predicted. By the early 2020s, EV conversions were trending. YouTubers were building Teslas into Beetles. Porsche 911s were going electric in private garages. There was a hunger for knowledge. And Wheeler Dealers, a show built on accessible expertise, missed the moment. Had Edd stayed? Could the series have evolved? Could it have kept its original fan base while inviting in a new one? Could it have remained educational, meaningful, and necessary? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is this. Edd saw the shift coming before almost anyone. And instead of chasing views, he chased vision, quietly. In a workshop the world forgot. And now that we've seen what he left behind, the question isn't whether the show could have changed. It's whether it ever deserved what he tried to give it. Project X never made it to air. It never got a reveal. There was no slow-motion beauty shot, no final polish, no triumphant test drive. To most of the world, it doesn't even exist. But that might be what makes it matter more. Because sometimes, the most meaningful projects aren't the ones that get finished. They're the ones that say something before they're even done. Project X is a perfect example. It showed what Edd China was always about, even when he wasn't allowed to say it out loud. Innovation without ego, engineering with conscience, passion without compromise. It didn't need a platform. It didn't need fanfare. It existed because it had to. Because when you're a builder at heart, the work doesn't stop just because the camera does. In a way, Project X became a symbol of what Wheeler Dealers could have evolved into, of what Edd tried to build behind the scenes, and of what happens when creative control gets in the way of progress. Fans who've heard the story now look at Edd differently, not just as the guy with the orange gloves, but as a pioneer, someone who stayed ahead of the curve, even if it meant walking alone. And though Project X sits unfinished, its message is crystal clear. Don't wait for permission to build something that matters. Because sometimes, the legacy isn't the car, it's the courage to imagine what it could have become. Today, Edd China continues to follow his own path, less televised, more intentional. Through workshop diaries, through speaking gigs, books, and bizarre mechanical creations, he still shares what made him a fan favorite in the first place. His brain, his calm, his relentless curiosity. He's no longer confined by format. No producers hovering, no runtime limits. He builds what he wants, when he wants, and if the public tunes in, great. If not, he's still building, still inventing, still proving that the real joy comes not from attention, but from the act of creation itself. Project X remains untouched, still in that garage, still wearing dust like a badge. And while Edd hasn't confirmed whether he'll finish it, fans continue to wonder, will it ever roll again? Or is its true purpose already fulfilled? Because in many ways, it already did what it was meant to. It reminded the world who Edd China really is. Not just a TV personality, but a builder, a thinker, a mechanic with principles, and a man who would rather walk away from a global hit show than compromise what he believes good engineering should be. He didn't need the spotlight. He didn't need the credit. He just needed the space to build something better. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the world needs more of. Fewer loud reveals and more quiet revolutions.